Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Nomad World weekly series. I'm Becky, and I'm going to be your host today. And we're going to be talking about checking off travel bucket lists with my guest, Chris Tarzan Clemens. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Becky. Thanks for having me.
Chris, I'm so excited to talk with you about all of your adventures because I'm sure your travel bucket list at the beginning was like so long and you have been able to check off quite a bit of things. So we're going to hear about it. But first of all, Chris, I'd love to hear about your background and how you got started with everything in the digital nomad world.
Yeah, I look back now and I don't really know how I ended up here. A long string of events, but I grew up pretty normal, was a young professional, went from Indiana, was living in Southern California, and didn't really have any intentions or plans to live like this. But after working for 6 years on my first job, I quit my job in my mid-20s and through hiked the Appalachian Trail. So I went to Georgia and spent 4.5 months hiking 2,184 miles from Georgia through 13 states all the way up to Maine. And that trip kind of changed everything for me. I went back to Santa Barbara, got a job, but I really wanted to continue to live minimally, like I lived out of my backpack. I wanted to continue challenging myself with physical endurance, and I wanted to see more of the world. So it wasn't immediate. It took about 3 years of working and getting creative and figuring out how to live and work while traveling. But after 3 years, I got my first freelance job and hit the road in my VW van, and I've been on the road ever since, and that was 2015.
First of all, congratulations on the through hike. That is so incredible. I wish we could do a whole show on that. And yeah, like you put a goal out there and you reached it. And I'm curious, like what did you end up doing for your freelance work? Because I know there's so many people listening that want to get a remote job and figure out how to do this too.
Yeah, I had no idea what to do. My background, my degree is in marketing and professional sales. So my first job out of college was selling cheesecake cutting machines. And ironically, I still kind of do that today. So before I left for the Appalachian Trail, I was working in marketing at the same company. I took over their whole marketing program, managing their trade shows, their social media, their website. So it was a skill set that I was building that could be done remotely, but I didn't have any idea how to do it. Finally, 3 years after the AT, I called my old boss and asked for my job back, but with the stipulation that I didn't want to work in the office and that I wanted to make my own hours. So they took me back, and that's essentially what I still do today is website design, website management, a bit of photo and video editing, trade show prep, social media. All of this stuff is pretty much self-taught. I've learned all of my skills through now YouTube University, and I've picked up a couple of other clients along the way, mostly centered in the commercial bakery equipment industry, business to business sales and marketing, but a couple other website design gigs on the side.
Incredible. And I love that that's like really, it's something everybody can think about. Okay, I already have a job. What if I just pitch this to my company and figure out a way to start working remotely?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's all about thinking outside the box. And again, looking back now, it makes sense to me. But for 30 years, I had this basic skill set that could have been done remotely, but I just didn't really know how to get it started. And it took a lot of thinking outside the box. It actually took a lot of, like internal turmoil and pain of I feel stuck here and I want to be on the road. Am I willing to risk everything? But yeah, starting with a skill that you already have that someone's already paying you for is often the best. Granted, not everyone is doing work that can really be done remotely, but if you're doing something on the computer, there's probably a way to pivot that into some sort of remote income.
Yeah, you'd be amazed if you start reaching out what could happen for you. And my last question about what you do for work is when you got those other clients, how did you get them?
For me, I value my time and my independence more than my income. So I'm not looking for new business. I'm solo. I work completely on my own. All of my work has been through friends. I really only work with my friends. Uh, One of my buddies has an agency and he brings together different creative people. So if he has website projects, I get pulled in, and that takes me out of the commercial baking industry. But my skill set really is honed for that business to business, long sales cycle time, capital equipment. That's where I've worked most of the time. And I know the industry because I spent so much time in it before and after the Appalachian Trail.
Love that it's quite a specific niche, and that's often what we tell people too, is like get as niched down as you can, and then if you've got a skill set in that, there's bound to be other clients in that industry, and then you can have a better chance, and also have the leverage perhaps to say, I'll keep doing this, or I'll do it for you, but remotely.
Exactly. Yep.
All right, Chris, I am like need to get to this part about the travel bucket list because I know you've got so many stories to share. So you've already hiked the Appalachian Trail at an early point in your life, it sounds like. And what else was on your list, and how did you and what have you managed to check off? Love to hear some of your adventures.
Yeah, it's a good question. When I left on the road, I probably didn't even really intend to be international. I was already living in Santa Barbara, California, in an old 1985 Volkswagen camper van, and I just wanted to see the United States. So that first year, the first 5 months, I drove all around the U.S. And then, as I got good at working from anywhere, any Starbucks or anything, I thought maybe I should try this international. I, of course, had read books and listened to podcasts. So at some point, I wrote down 6 countries on a piece of paper that were all relatively inexpensive, warm in the northern hemisphere wintertime, and had good Wi-Fi. And I put all 6 of them on there with the number 1 to 6. I went into Walmart, I bought a die, and I just rolled a die. Number 6 came up. So that winter, I parked the van in storage and I flew down to Ecuador and spent 3 months kind of popping through Ecuador and Peru. And that really was like the initial start of this international idea. So over the next few years until the pandemic, basically, I spent 6 months in the country and then 6 months internationally. As far as the bucket list things go, a lot of my travels now kind of incorporate flights for clients. So sometimes we have trade shows in Germany or India or Las Vegas. I've also been hired for work on events in Bhutan and things like that. So typically, if I have a flight that I'm being paid to go somewhere, I just book a one way, and then I just figure out what's in that region that it sounds like it'd be fun to do. So I've hiked the Camino, I've hiked the Inca Trail, um, I've bicycle toured through Thailand, motorbike through Vietnam. So a lot of it ends up being post work or pre-event travels. But if I can get one of those flights paid for, it kind of puts me in the ideal situation to then tick off the bucket list items in that region.
That is such a genius way to do it. You made me think of a friend I have who's working on cruise ships, and she's always getting flown out to start the voyage. So anything that you guys can think of that might help with the business trip side, that's incredible. What a way to save money.
Yep, yep, it helps.
You mentioned Bhutan, and I find this country really fascinating. I think it's a place not a lot of travelers have been to. From what I understand, you did something called the Snowman Trek. Is that right?
Yeah, so a few years ago, because I spend so much time in the ultra endurance world, I have a lot of friends that manage trail races. And eventually I got picked up by my buddy Lewis, and I work with him now, setting up and managing trail running ultra marathons, mostly in the United States. But he had the opportunity to be the international race director for a 5 day stage race ultra marathon in the Kingdom of Bhutan, and he needed help. And of course, I have time and flexibility and location independence. So I signed on pretty quick. In 2022, we went to Bhutan around this time, actually, in August, and we pre-hiked the Snowman Trek. I think we spent 12 or 14 days on the trail marking out the GPS coordinates for the runners. And then went back, we created the map. And in October of 22, we had 30 runners, international athletes, like really good runners who came out and ran the race. But as part of the race, I was in charge working in one of the aid stations or camps. And it took us 5 days with almost 30 people and 30 pack animals to hike into this very remote region in the Lunana Valley. And then we just waited for the runners to come through. They spent one night in our camp. They continued on in the race, and then we spent 5 days hiking back out. So it was a wild, incredible experience. I've always known a little bit about Bhutan, had always wanted to go. It's relatively prohibitively expensive as a tourist, or at least for me. So I was very fortunate with this opportunity and just very thankful. And actually, we're planning to go back in this October to manage the race again. So one, I like to say it was a once in a lifetime opportunity, but now this might be my third time in the kingdom. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Can you describe what is Bhutan like for people who have never been? And what is I know I mentioned the snowman trek, but what is so difficult about the snowman trek for people who have no idea what that is?
Yeah, so the Kingdom of Bhutan is nestled in the Himalaya between Tibet, India. It's like a Nepal, but smaller and obviously not as tourist trafficked. Where we land in Paro and go to the capital, and then our race all takes place up in the high Himalaya, really on the border of Tibet, China. Um, the difficulty of this is the remoteness. So if anything goes wrong, you're really out there. We had a few runners that had altitude sickness at my aid station, and they had to be helicoptered out. That's really the only way back to civilization. There's no roads. You're either hiking days on end or you're getting emergency evacuated. Also for the race in particular, and this is really on the second half of the snowman trek or the trail that most people would go spend about a month hiking across. The second half is where we run the race, and it's at the very high elevation. So I forget, I believe the average elevation, and this is going to be in feet, sorry for anyone internet, in meters. It's around 15,000 feet or above 15,000 feet is the average elevation. So, for me coming, maybe I'm coming from Colorado, I can't even get to that elevation for training. And that's just the average of this race. So it's really high up there.
Yeah, I've actually looked at this trek before, and I think it's above 5,000 meters if you're looking for meter measurement. So it's,
Yeah,
that's for people unaware, that's really high, and you'll start to feel elevation and altitude affects it. I believe it's about 2,400 meters, if I'm not
yep,
mistaken. So yeah, that is, I think, the grueling part that would be a constant like battle for you if you're on this trek.
absolutely. Yeah. But it's beautiful. You're up there with these massive mountains all around you and these glacial turquoise lakes and rivers and of course the Highlanders, the Liaps and Lunaps. You're walking through their villages and there's yak herders out for the summer. It was an incredible experience.
I assume you have to be very well trained, and there may not be time to be prepared if you want to go in October. Is there still a way to sign up?
So it's such a difficult race, and the purpose of the snowman race is to draw awareness for climate change and global warming and the impact that that's having on these highland communities with glaciers melting more and dams bursting and kind of devastating their culture. So it's a privately invited event. All of the athletes have been asked to run. There's no sign up. This year it'll only be 20 athletes running. So it's almost more of a way to spread the message of the Kingdom of Bhutan and what these remote villages are experiencing that they it's definitely disrupting their lifestyles.
Just wanted to get that clarified for people who are like listening, like, "Ooh, there's still time. I want to go." It
Yeah,
is
unfortunately, no, but definitely go to snowmanrace.org, and then during the race in October, you can follow the progress. We have GPS trackers on all of the athletes, and you can literally just see how they're going each day. And the images, the photos and videos that will come out of this race are incredible.
so excited that you get to go again.
Yeah.
What else have you achieved on your bucket list that you would just like have to share with us, or you think would inspire people?
It's a good question. Most of the things that I would look back and be happy about are the endurance events that I've participated in or challenged myself with. Like I bicycle toured across Thailand during the pandemic. Um, I bicycle toured in Patagonia with a friend. I've hiked the Camino de Santiago twice. The first time I did the French way by myself, that was pure out of luck that I had worked at a trade show in Munich, Germany with my clients. So I booked a one-way flight. And literally at the end of the show, I didn't know what I was doing. I just waited a couple days. I went to Decathlon. I bought a backpack. And all of a sudden, I was on this 3 week long trek. Recently, I went back and just hiked the Portuguese route this past year. This one was a little more special because I invited my dad, and then it turned out that my brother could come too. So that was pretty cool to do another Camino, but do it with my dad and my brother. That was definitely special. So I don't know. I just kind of get myself into, especially endurance challenges or hikes or something that puts me out in nature, but in a place that's new to me or different to also see what the culture is like.
Wow, I'd love to hear a little bit about how the Camino was with your dad and your brother. Like, do you hike for like 3, 4 hours a day, and then where do you stay along the way? Like hotels or yeah.
Yeah, the Portuguese route with them was a little bit different from my first hike. My first hike, because I was solo and it was near the end of the season, finding out a bunk in an albergue was very easy. What we found on the Portuguese route, it was pretty busy, and there were three of us. It was almost easier for us to book a hotel, a small room with three beds, and we would normally do that that morning or the day before. So we had that flexibility of how far we wanted to hike each day. But for us, a typical day was wake up at sunrise, have some coffee, have a bit of breakfast, maybe hike for an hour or two, sit down for second breakfast and coffee, maybe book a hotel for the night, and then just kind of hike on. Typically get to our destination by 1 or 2 in the afternoon, check in, do our sink laundry, clean up, relax, go get a glass of wine or a cold beer and explore each of these villages or cities along the way. It was pretty cool. We were taking it pretty easy, but pretty regularly it was about 10 to 15K, maybe up to 20K a day, and 5 or 6 hours of hiking with some good stops and along the way.
You tell me what an albergue is. You mentioned this, maybe people don't know.
Yeah, the albergues are essentially pilgrim hostels. And again, on my first hike, I predominantly stayed in albergues. It's a place where a bunch of pilgrims, and pilgrims are the hikers doing the Camino. They all congregate in these albergues each evening. They're often municipal albergues and are very inexpensive, 5 to 10 euro a night, something like that, where accommodation in Europe would be a lot more than that if you're paying for hotels. Plus, you get the added benefit of the community. So all of everyone else around you is going through the same thing, the same weather. They're on their own pilgrimage, but you're sharing this together. And some of them will have a nice communal dinner, at least some open spaces where you can meet everyone else. So it's it's really a big part of the community of the Camino is the albergue culture.
Yeah, I that's one reason that this is still on my bucket list is I would love to meet all of these incredible people from all walks of life walking together for such a long journey. And you all end up in the same church in Spain, right? The Santiago de Compostela.
Yep. Yeah, there are multiple different paths, but that's kind of the epicenter. Everyone, and I believe like really the pilgrimage, the original pilgrimage would be kind of you walk out your front door and you just make your way to Santiago. And some people do that. And that's also the benefit of the albergues is you'll meet people who literally from Poland or Germany, they walked out their door and have just been walking from home going to Santiago. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't wait to one day check that off my bucket list.
Yeah.
What is still on your bucket list? Tarzan. Can I call you Tarzan?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, like I said, I don't. I mean, there are a lot of places I want to go, right? And a lot of times it ends up because I'm in that area for work. One thing that I would definitely go out of my way for someday when the opportunity presents itself would be Antarctica. I've definitely wanted to see or experience Antarctica for a long time, but that's a big commitment. Um, that's probably at the top. Of course, if I get a trade show in India or if I get a trade show in South Africa, I'll kind of do some things in that area. But yeah, you're just kind of going with the flow for now.
Yeah, I know Antarctica, it's really expensive and I always yeah, trying to balance climate change and what is feasible for me. A lot of my bucket list things are still like not accessible because of the governments of those countries at the moment. I would love to hike in Venezuela. There's some beautiful like flat top mountains that you have seen if you've seen the movie Up.
Hmm.
Are. But yeah, some of these places are still, yeah, I don't know when they're going to be accessible. So do also think of safety, everyone. Don't go to these places that you probably shouldn't be in, despite thinking, you can manage it. It's like, yeah, maybe not yet.
Yeah, maybe not a good idea.
Don't push it. I know also sometimes American citizens have more trouble accessing certain countries than others, but yeah, there's so much on the bucket list. Like you said, it's just a matter now of affording it and also getting the time off from work.
Yep,
Chris, would love to now move on to the lightning round and ask you some travel related questions. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. What's one thing that you wish you knew about being a nomad before starting your journey?
Hmm. I guess maybe how easy it really has been. That being said, of course, it took me a long time to figure out how to do this, but once I did it, it's just been kind of rolling along. So those 3 years of just that internal turmoil of can I do this? Yes, I could do it. So I wish I would have known that earlier, but
Yeah, I've just found you need to have that little extra time to plan, book your flights, book your hotels. But once it's all booked in, it's yeah, just do what you've booked and just roll with
yeah,
it. All
yeah.
right, number two, what's one thing you could not live without while traveling?
Typically, I travel pretty light. I would say my laptop. On this trip, I'm currently in Bulgaria. I've spent the summer in Europe. Uh, I was in Serbia and my laptop broke. It just overheated, completely gone. And the next day I had to go to the store and buy a second one. So now I'll probably travel with two going forward for redundancy. But yeah, I mean, this I have to have my laptop in order to do this. So
I'd say that's the thing I worry most about when I'm traveling. And I have a backup at my home, like my residence, but I always think because I have an Apple and not every country has an Apple store and all this stuff. So I understand that. I would say probably
yep,
most people feel their laptop as a nomad is the most important thing.
yep.
Phone or laptop, though? Which one's more important to you?
Probably laptop because I do the real work from the laptop. So I could probably get away with not having other things.
Okay. I'm just curious. I can't really make that choice right now. I use them so
Yeah.
much. Number three, Chris, what's your favorite travel book that inspired you?
Favorite travel book. I do read a lot. I do a lot of audiobooks from my public library back home. Probably it's kind of cliche, but probably the one that inspired me the most would have been the 4 Hour Work Week. Um, I read that shortly after the Appalachian Trail, and that's probably where I got this idea that I could travel, move, and make my own money, not tied to an office or a cubicle. Um, but I don't. Looking back, I mean, it's a good book. Now I think I read a lot of adventure travel books, so people that are bicycle touring around the world, riding motorcycles around the world, hiking, kayaking, exploring jungles or mountains. Like that's what inspires me now are stories like that.
I can see that. Yeah, I've read a couple of books myself that inspired me to go to certain places. Maybe not always, it wouldn't seem like there'd be a connection. Have you read Into Thin Air by John Krakauer?
Yep, that's a good one.
It doesn't for no not really a spoiler alert, but spoiler alert, it's not a happy ending for a lot of
Yep,
people in the book, but it did inspire me to go to the Himalayas. And I don't know if you've been trekking in Nepal, but it's a really great experience, and there's plenty of operate tour guide operators you can join up with and do however hard of a hike you want to do.
yep, yep. That's awesome.
I personally don't recommend Everest to people. I would never tell people to climb Mount Everest because I think it's way too crowded, it's way too expensive, and I don't want to risk something like that for my family personally, but it's also something, of course, people try to do.
Yep. But there's also so many other mountains in different regions around the world that are beautiful as well. So there's opportunities, especially if you want to go find something that's a little more remote and less touristy, I guess.
Yeah, I personally like if I'm gonna hike a mountain, like I still want to just be on a trail. I don't want to get out on an ice pick or even ropes.
Yep.
I'm just wanting to be on the trail and then I feel okay. Like it's something doable. But a lot of people, yeah, need the adrenaline and the challenge of having more equipment and more challenging terrain.
Yep. And that's for me, that's part of the problem. I travel so light. I'm either living out of my truck camper in North America or a backpack here. And the alpinist equipment or winter, I don't do any winter sports because then I'd need skis and layers. So I stick pretty close to lightweight, trail running, long distance hiking, maybe bicycle touring, things that for me is minimal equipment that kind of fits in with my minimalist lifestyle, but seems to
Yeah,
work.
I'm sure if it's on someone's bucket list and they want to do it, they will find a way. I mean, there's so many tour operators to help you with this. But yeah, it's
Yep.
all about where you're at, your budget, what you can do with vacation. So hopefully the people listening or watching will, yeah, be able to find the company that's going to help them achieve something on their bucket list. Chris, I
Yep.
have two more questions on the lightning round. No, okay, the first one is if you were speaking to someone interested in starting their digital nomad journey, but they're feeling afraid or they're not sure, what would you tell them?
So I would say, first of all, just be patient, but continue thinking about it and pursuing it. And also, secondly, just do it. So from my experience, I knew I really wanted it, but it took 3 years for me to figure out a creative way to make this happen. And looking back, it seems like an easy answer, but I know for those 3 years, it was just really difficult to figure out how to get the ball rolling. So I think I was able to do that by just sticking with the dream, right? And thinking outside of the box, like how can I actually make this happen? So stick with it. And then at some point, you just got to do it. You got to make the phone call. You got to get the first client. You got to book the flight. You got to quit your job. And you know, also thinking back, worst case scenario, I quit my job and I hit the road. And if in the first month or in the first 5 months it didn't work out, worst case scenario is I probably could have gone back and got my same job back. So worst case scenario probably isn't that bad. I know it seems terrifying, but worst case is probably not that bad.
Yeah, there's always a path back, whether you can't get that same job, but something adjacent to what you were doing. Which brings me to my final question. Do you have any creative ideas for finding a remote job? I know you mentioned already you work only with your friends. I'm sure that's one way.
Yeah, it's cool. I was just out last night at a birthday party here in Bansko, Bulgaria, with a bunch of digital nomads, and the conversation came up of what we all do, and it's really interesting. There are so many unique, creative things that people do to make income that you probably just wouldn't even think about. But a lot of us are doing things that we had been doing before, right? And being paid a full-time wage at a desk job to do something very similar to this. So if someone's looking for a way to make location independent or freelance or digital nomad income, I would definitely start with what you're already being paid to do, because someone's already valued your work enough to pay you for that. Uh, and just think outside the box. Like, is there a way to take this online and down the street or across the nation or around the world? Like, you know, there's probably a way to do that, but it's I know getting from A to B is very difficult. Like I said, for me, it took 3 years, but I'd probably start with what you're already being paid for and see if you can get that outside that box and outside that cubicle.
Fantastic advice. And certainly, I think the easiest way, and maybe something you could do as you're still working, just start on that side hustle and then build it to the remote dream that you've been working towards.
Yeah, that's also a great way to do it. I didn't do that, but I know a lot of people do. And yeah, that's probably a safer, better first step.
That was the way I did it, and I guess I needed to feel safe. At the time, I was living in an expensive country, so I was like, I can't drop everything right now. But yeah, everybody's got their way, and we're all working towards that same remote dream. And I'm now wondering, Chris, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before you go?
No, I think that was it was a great conversation, a lot of very good questions, and made me think again about, why I'm doing this and why after almost 10 years I'm still doing it. And this life definitely is not for everyone. And digital nomad really probably doesn't even have to be full time. Maybe there's a way you can make it seasonal or something like that. For me personally, I love this. People ask me all the time when I'm going to stop traveling or when I'm going to settle down, and I never say never, but right now, like I don't know why I wouldn't keep doing this. But yeah, I mean, find your own path too. So this, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can watch YouTube videos, but the way they're doing it doesn't have to be the way you want to do it. So it needs to be a personal decision too.
I really love that. I don't think we hear that enough. Like it doesn't have what you do does not have to be the same as what you're seeing out there. Find what works for you. Especially like if you have
Yeah,
children, that's a whole different way of digital nomad life, but it is possible as well.
yeah, totally.
Well, Chris, if people want to follow you, where can they go?
I'm pretty easy to find online. So it's Chris Tarzan Clemens. I Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel that's mostly outdoor adventures or truck camper living, but yeah, pretty easy to find. Chris Tarzan Clemens.
I'll remember that. Everybody, remember that. Go check out Chris's adventures. We hope this has inspired you to maybe look into more things to add to your bucket list or start tackling them because, yeah, time is always moving. And, if there's something you've really been burning to do, go ahead and start the planning. That's what I would say.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And good luck in Bhutan.
Thank you.